Shalom. Let me get straight into this lesson. What's crazy is I was preparing this lesson. I was watching a brother lesson. He was showing this Jake bugging out because Jake, some of these Jake you see in the world, some of these Israelite men, so-called black men in the world, they see that this place is finished. They see it, and Jake was bugging out. Talking about prep and all this and that. Look, if you ain't got the Lord, you ain't gonna make it up out of here. It's just what it is. That's how. That's the. I'm just gonna give it to you straight up. You know, that's the times that we're coming into. If you ain't got the Lord, you're not gonna make it out of Babylon. And you gotta have the truth, and not some of the truth, and not partials of the truth. You gotta have the complete truth, and the complete truth starts with a name. And all these other people in the world can mock us. They can make fun of us. They can do whatever they want to do. But we're gonna have the last laugh. Promise you that. So I'm gonna get into this video. You're gonna have to put on your thinking cap on this lesson, because we're gonna break this all down. I'm gonna break it down to you. This Edomite looking guy is gonna break this shit down on a real deep level. Now let's get into this. I want you to pay attention to what's going on, because I'm gonna be doing a commentary. I got scriptures and other things lined up, and I don't think I'm gonna be able to get to it, but I'm gonna do what I can within this time constraint. Let's get into it. Let's lock it.
Walk you through the part of the world nobody seems willing to map out. Because what everyone is screaming about on TikTok, corrupt politicians, endless wars, collapsing currencies, censorship, land seizures, trafficking rings, and cult-like elites. These are not disconnected tragedies. These are symptoms of a structure. They are the smoke leaking out of an engine hidden below deck. Most people still think power is just governments, or just corporations, or just billionaires. Wrong. Power is an ecosystem. It has layers and functions like an organism. And once you see all the layers working together, the veil drops, and the world makes horrifying sense.
Yeah, I'm gonna let them cook some more, but I'm gonna pause it real quick, because what you know as reality from when you came out the womb, right? You went to grade school, elementary, then you went to middle school, the brothers that have been educated in the system, then you went to high school, and some of your brothers and your sisters went to so-called college to get more brainwashed. What you thought was facts and reality, it's all been a big illusion. You only know what you've been taught. I'm gonna say that again. You only know what you've been taught. So if you only been taught a certain way or something a certain way, to you that's your truth, until something else comes to challenge that. So that's what we have right now. What you know is so-called money, even though we have to use this fiat currency, right, to do things in this system, because we're in captivity, it's not real money. But the illusion and the witchcraft is on the people to think it's real so-called money. When you go into money, the definition of money is gold and silver. That's the true definition according to the Lord, and these elites know that's real money. What you have today is a illusion. It's like going back into the Babylonian money magic. It's all an illusion. It's just only real because you think it's real. It's an illusion. Let's keep going.
Let's start with empire. The United States isn't just a country. It is the military arm of a supranational order. It projects force, controls trade lanes, and keeps the global financial system obedient. London and New York are the financial capitals.
Boom, going back into prophecy that America came out of Britain, right? So the Britain is the financial system of this beast system, and they control, going back into the Rothschild family, even the names that you never heard of. They control the monetary system, and these would be the so-called Jewish people today that you know them as today, that control the modern banking system. And you got some called a SWIFT. SWIFT is how they transfer digital money, so-called, through different systems, through different banks. So really what you know as money is not what you think it is. When they go create so-called money, they just type imaginary numbers inside of the computer. And what props up this system is the military and the petrodollar, right? So the agreement they made with the Saudis, so called, that they would only be able to buy the world um, nations only could be able to buy all in the United States dollar. So that props up the fiat currency to make it seem like it's worth something, but it's really not. What's backing it up is the military arm, which is Washington D.C. Keep going.
Silicon Valley and the intelligence agencies handle surveillance, data, and information manipulation. Switzerland and Basel coordinate central banking, and Israel, yes, plays a unique role, not as the throne of global power, but as a geopolitical fulcrum, intelligence hub, and religious symbolic keystone that plugs the spiritual mythology into the machinery of empire. Evangelical Christians.
Yeah, so how it's structured, the bankers, which are the Jewish people, the Rothschild family, thrown at them, and so on and so forth, the Rockefellers, and what they'll do in some cases is they'll switch their name to a more American sounding name, but yet they have roots back into the Jewish Amalekites. If they make sense, going back into the Khazars, going back to Amalek, and go back to Esau. So how they able to control the world is through a fake monetary system, and it's based on debt. So this debt-based system is how they able to put countries in debt and actually obtain real commodities and resources. I'm gonna post this video called "The Economic Hitman" on my next lesson, so you can understand that structure, how it's done. But the Jewish people control the banking. The banking funds all the military, the religious systems, all that. It's all funneled through that, but it's all based on Esau Edom structure, rulership.
Cheer for Israel, not because they understand geopolitics, but because they have been theologically programmed for decades to believe Israel is the key to the second coming. They don't realize that their prophecy obsession creates popular support for policies that benefit the empire. One side uses religion, the other side uses strategy. Different motivations, same outcome.
Yeah, same agenda, because you got something that's called the Illuminati. And in Illuminati, you have these skull and bones, you have the Freemasons, and all these pretty much work, in one way, form, or another, to one agenda, which is a new world order. So they'll set up these different branches of the new world order system to seem like it's working independently, but it's all working together. It's going back into a main source of power, like the Matrix.
But to understand how this whole machine runs, you have to understand the monetary illusion that keeps the population obedient.
Check this out.
Everyone grows up believing that governments need tax dollars to spend money.
Check this shit out.
The IRS is the collection plate and the Pentagon waits patiently for the offering. That's not how it works. The US government does not need your tax dollars to fund anything. It prints its own currency at will. It borrows from itself. It issues debt to absorb dollars out of circulation. Taxes don't fund spending. Taxes prevent inflation and maintain control. Put another way, the government creates money. The IRS destroys money. The spending comes first. The taxation comes later to balance the books and justify its own authority. So when the government tells you, we don't have the money for healthcare, or housing, or education, or infrastructure, what they're really saying is, we refuse to allocate resources to you, but we'll allocate infinite resources to war, surveillance, foreign interests, and corporate bailouts. This explains why trillions appear overnight for Ukraine, Israel, or Wall Street, because those expenditures serve strategic power. Meanwhile, domestic spending is treated like charity. It's punishment disguised.
Yeah, remember, so this is how it works. The Federal Reserve is controlled by the Rothschild families, etc. All these different Jewish families. They control the monetary system for this country and pretty much all the countries in the known world, besides a few. So how this works is they create debt out of thin air. Remember, nothing is back and none of this up. They create debt out of thin air and then put you under a debt-based system, if that makes sense. That's why you have to get loans. That's why you have to get a mortgage. That's why you have to get car loans. That's why you have to borrow to fund and pay for things, because most people don't have it. This is a debt-based system based on money that's been all created out of thin air. You see where I'm going with this? So they go to show you that the immense power that they have, the Edomites, the Amalekites, to create money out of thin air, and this is all prophecy, that they will be ruling at the end. Create money out of thin air that don't exist. It's not backed by anything. It's not gold and silver. Remember, the dollar was taken off the gold standard in 1971 by Nixon, and Nixon was just a puppet that was doing what he was told, because they run a blackmail operation on all the politicians, and all the politicians have been compromised. So they do whatever the J people want them to do. So again, they took it off the gold standard in 1971. Thus, I think in 1974 they put it on the petrodollar. That's the creation of the petrodollar. So in essence, how they actually create money is out of thin air. How they distribute the money is based on debt.
As scarcity. It's austerity as moral theater. The government doesn't need your tax dollars. It only needs your obedience.
You heard that?
Now, put that financial layer next to the shadow economy, the realm where legality dissolves and power becomes fluid. Trafficking is not just abuse, it's infrastructure. It creates money, leverage, blackmail, and mutual guilt among the elites. That's how you seal ruling circles together. That is how you make sure nobody defects or tells the truth when the stakes are global. Go look at Epstein. He wasn't just a pervert billionaire, he was a node, a convergence point where finance, intelligence, academia, royalty, and politics all collide.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think nobody wants the client list released? Because the entire system runs on compromise. That's how you bind elites into obedience. Mutual destruction. This is also where cultism enters the picture. Not robes and chanting, but ideological cults, political cults, esoteric fraternities, intelligence operations, and elite circles built on secrecy, initiation, and hierarchy. You don't control a ruling class by telling them you're powerful. You control them by making them complicit. You control them by giving them secrets and sins to protect. Now, combine the shadow economy with the overt economy. Corporations handle production and technology. Banks handle capital flows. Intelligence agencies handle information, sabotage, covert action, and blackmail. The militaries handle force. Media handles narrative. Religious institutions handle myth and prophecy. Together, they manufacture consent, extract wealth, and reshape nations without ever declaring war in public. This is why modern conquest doesn't look like Napoleon storming borders. It looks like private equity swallowing real estate. It looks like IMF loans restructuring entire nations.
You heard that? Like IMF? When they come in, remember, they create this money out of thin air. They just type it in their system. And they say, okay, we're giving you $10 trillion. I'm just $10 billion. Now you owe us. And you need to make these payments back through taxes. Remember, all this is imaginary. That's why it's a money magic to it. It's a magic. It's a witchcraft to this. Because remember, they created this out of thin air. Nothing. You see what I'm saying? But he broke down a lot of the system that we're currently under. And this is why we know who's in rulership. Because whoever controls the money, they control the whole world. All right. Hopefully this lesson was edifying. Call Allah Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shah, Bahashim, Rachat, Kodesh. Shalom.